Welcome to another episode of the Chronicles of Mister. I am once again joined by a wonderful guest. This is her second time on the podcast, and we're really appreciative of having her here, Ms.Kuiana Blackwell. Yeah. Kiana, how are you? How are you?
I'm doing all right. I'm pretty good. No
Good.
complaints.
How has the last academic year been for you?
It was something. Um, it was something for a whole bunch of different reasons, but it was something. And I got through it.
Amen to that. And so many teachers ever since the pandemic hit it has been something. It continues to be something. And if it's not COVID, it seems like there's a variant, there's another wave. Now monkeypox or chickenpox or whatever pox there's something else. And as educators, we're just always asking ourselves, like, okay, what's next? What's next? What next? And so I guess that leads me to the next question, like, hey, what is next for you?
So yeah, last time we spoke, I said, the classroom, that was it. And I was looking to figure out, what was going on. I took that leap of faith and left my job without like a clear idea what was next. And it was definitely an eye opener for me because I hadn't looked for a job in over 8 years. And so I was just like, I didn't even know what was out there or where to look. So that whole experience, like interviewing again, getting oh, I'm sorry, we've gone somewhere else, like all of that hit me. And I was just like, what did I just do? Like, I left a job with people I love.
Mm-hmm.
And now I'm out here looking like, well, these bills don't stop. um, but I was actually who was very sad to see me go, and I was very sad to leave her, recommended me for my current position I'm going to be starting. Right. And so that was like a big blessing in itself because like not that we left on bad terms. It's just like I never expected her to be the one to like set me up for my next position. So I will be the SPED coordinator at a different middle school. And I am super, super, super excited about it.
Congratulations. Now, for this position, since you are transitioning from the classroom to being, could you say the position title one more time?
SPED coordinator.
SPED coordinator. Mm-hmm. What were sort of the steps or what led to that particular position?
So, as you know, I've gone back and forth between teaching 1 to 2 grades. And after like putting my foot down saying the 2 grade thing wasn't up, the whole SPED role kind of got introduced to me. Just slowly, like I did guided reading here and there. And then we needed more than one person running the SPED department. And so our dean had then developed this learning specialist position. She was like, try it. I'm like, I guess. I don't know what I'm doing, but you know me, I'm like, I'll try it.
Learn, yeah.
And I loved it. And so I was like, oh, this is actually really good. And so I had done that for 2 years, which then introduced me into this SPED world. And so I was definitely open to figuring out what else would come of it. But like, again, I had no idea that it was going to bring me to here.
So to anyone listening, what at least what I'm hearing is you're in the position of science teacher. However, these other roles were suggested to you, and rather than sort of like stiff arm them, you're like, all right, let me give it a shot. Let me try. I may not be 100%, but I'll learn. And over time, that has led you to you being where you are now, instead of transitioning from in the classroom to now being the coordinator for SPED. So congratulations.
Thank you. And like one thing to say too, like I knew previously that teaching wasn't my end goal anyway. And so like the SPED opportunity was like, let's see what this is to see where it can go. Again, not really thinking it was going to go anywhere, but I'm like, I can dibble and dabble here. And at our organization, they are quick to give you a chance to experience something. And so I was like, anything they threw at me, I'm like, let me take it and see if I like it, keep doing it. If not, tell them I don't want to do it. And so I just happened to like it and keep going, and it just kept growing.
I think and there's a real like balance to that as well too, because we know the organization too of like, hey, do this, try this, and attempting to put 100 and other task on your plate.
Yes.
But knowing how to balance out of like, hey, what is my end goal? And if a person who knows your values, and I'm assuming you're the dean that you spoke of, as well as the principal, like, hey, we know who Kiana is. She could be for this, she could be for that. And that led
Mhm.
to eventually you trying it out.
Yeah. And then trusting that because again, I'm one to say like, I don't know if I could do that, but like having like even when RG came to me and was like,
Yeah.
next year try doing seventh and eighth. And I was like, I just started doing one and I went and did it. And I was like, I'm doing it. And I didn't think I could, and I'm doing it. And so like when they would like, I would go to them and say, I'm thinking about this new task. I want this leadership role.
Yeah.
And he was real good about like, hey, I don't have that, but we can see what this is gonna do. And just like putting me in positions to like to get grade level lead, see how this feels, and like continue to like build that skill and confidence in myself just to see like what else I can do.
Yeah. I'm seeing this common thread of there are three people you've mentioned so far, and like there's a commonality in each of these people. And I'm like, awesome black woman, another awesome black woman, another awesome black woman helping an awesome black woman. So like, please have black women in your schools because they're awesome, but they
Yes.
also know that I know somebody who knows somebody who would be great for this position or for this task.
Yes.
And they may not have at the moment the title or the credential or whatever, but they can get the job done for in or
Mhm.
in service of the kiddos who need that. So like you mentioned, not initially going in for sped, but knowing like, hey, we have kiddos who need these services. You can provide those services, and then it leading to where you are right now.
Yeah, that's so true because like when I think to the first time I even entertained like the thought of a dean role, I went to two strong black women. I was like, do you even think I could do this? And they immediately was like, why not?
Yeah.
And like T was like, why didn't you apply before? And I'm like, I had no idea the role was even available. And that was like one of the things she was like, she was ready to like in that. And like since then, would put everything in. Here's what we have. If you want to do this, apply, which had never been done before. Like I would come back from summer break to someone else filling a position that I had no idea was even open before.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
she's really good about just laying it out there. Like, here's all we have. If this is something you're interested in, go ahead and apply.
Yeah. I think that's something too of I know I'm guilty of that as well because RG plenty of times was like, hey, Wooly, you should really do this. Hey, Wooly, you should really apply for this. Hey, Wooly, I see you're already doing the 1, 2, and 3. However, if you just did 4, blah, 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 blah. I mean, relay. So there have been plenty of things. And even talking to Serena too, of like, hey, Wooly, have you thought of this? Or this was a conversation that I was having about X, Y, and Z. And so having those people, those advocates who are aware of things to then be able to say like, hey, have you considered this, or are superior and fantastic assets in any organization.
Definitely. Definitely.
Thinking about your time in the classroom and knowing that, how many years were you in the classroom? Let me ask that first.
8 at my last school, and then like 2.5-ish, like at other places before.
Like, what is something that you've taken from those 10 plus so years of like, this is really going to be something I want to keep in mind? Because I've seen plenty of teachers who are in the classroom, leave the classroom, and then it's like, do you remember what it was like? Do you remember the day to day, the week to week, the month to month, like so that as you're stepping into this new role, like it doesn't completely like, oh, amnesia to Miss Blackwell, the former Miss
You
Blackwell.
listen, that is something I'm definitely trying to figure out how to take with me because I remember that jump, like seeing people who were sitting in the staff room with me complaining about leadership and things to then go join leadership and still do those things. And I'm just like, we just talked about this last week.
Yeah,
And so I think part of it for me is staying connected to those in the classroom. Like I still have friends, close friends, family members in the classroom. And so just staying close with them. My niece literally just graduated and just got her first like official full-time certified position. And so
excellent.
like listening to her and things like that to just keep me like in it. Cause like I like being honest, that is a true fear of mine, to like go on and start asking people to do things without remembering what I felt like when someone was asking something crazy of me.
Yeah.
So I think just staying grounded, staying connected, and then like every time I ask someone to do something, I like just thinking about, what am I really asking them to do? Do they need to do this? Is it feasible?
Yeah. Because that makes me also think of like us as teachers in the classroom with kiddos and us forgetting at times. Do you remember what it was like to be a student, to sit inside of a classroom, listening to Mr. or Miss, and like, why are they asking me to, like them not understanding the rationale, and at times us as teachers not correctly or adequately verbalizing, hey, the reason why I'm asking you to do XYZ or not do XYZ. So that rationale and that connection there. So listening to you say that is like, yeah, I want to remember as the summer is winding down and getting ready for another school year, like to really have that rationale down pat. And if it isn't really solid and shaky, then to say that to think, all right, do the kids really need to do this or not do this? Or
Mm-hmm.
does this need to be something that I'm
Yeah.
explicitly like, hey, please do it XYZ way, when a kiddo could be like, but mister, couldn't I just do this? And for me to be like, you know what, you're right. Let's go with that instead. If
Mm-hmm.
it's not gonna be detrimental to learning. Yeah.
That made me think of two things. One was like when I had to, once I began to feel myself being stretched so thin and thinking of all the things that I was asking kids to do, and really saying, let me just pull out what I really care about them doing. We
Mm-hmm.
have 3 lessons to get to this one aim. I need to get them to this aim. I can pull from each of these and make one really good lesson instead of stretching it out or just trying all these different things.
Yeah.
And then another thing, which was, I never even told you this. I remember when kids would call you Mister, and you would always correct them to say Mr. Pierre. And
Yep.
I was like, oh, I wonder if I should do that too, because they call me Miss.
Yeah.
And I never did. But for me, it was a moment of thinking about what I actually cared about. I remember being the student who said Miss all the time to my teachers. And it wasn't like I didn't respect you enough to say your name. It was just something that I did. And so I'm like, I initially thought because you corrected them that I needed to.
Yeah.
And then I had to ask myself, like, but I mean, it doesn't really bother me. I actually like it because I remember being that person. And so, like, to this day, every time I talk about kids or they say miss, and I'm just like, I remember Willie. And like that always stuck with me because like you would say it and they would call you Mr. Pierre. And I respected that. But like I truly felt at one point I had to do that. I probably started doing it for a while too, until I realized how much it like how like I liked the miss and it didn't really bother me. And I was able to like just be myself and like they can call me Miss. I like Miss. Miss works for me.
And to that, I would speak to, I would say to my younger self, because I remember the rationale behind it. I was just like, I really like Pierre. I'm Mr. Pierre. Like, I don't want you to get me confused with Mr. Tripkosh
Mm-hmm.
or Mr. Reamer or Mr. Thomas or any other Mr. I'm like, I'm Mr. Pierre. Please say, like, that was the rationale I had for the kids. And I
Mm-hmm.
explained to them, hey, I really like when you call me Mr. Pierre because
Mm-hmm.
now I'm also like, I'm older. Look, I get it. I get it. I've now with 15 years underneath my belt, I don't know how many thousand of kiddos I've like if I look at you and I'm like, hey kiddo, like in my brain, I'm like, I'm saying kiddos to give myself enough time to go through the Rolodex of like names. Which kiddo are you? Or if it's like, look, I just need to get through this direction and I don't want to say, hey Kiana, can you do blah blah blah? It's like, hey kiddo, can you do da 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 da?
Mm-hmm.
Then the kids know like, oh, he's not only speaking to Kiana, but it's also like understood that the rest of us as well. So like I think it goes back to that rationale of, hey, why are you choosing to do it? Because if it's
Mm-hmm.
like you mentioned the whole respect aspect of it, I don't think any of the kids were doing it out of disrespect, like, oh, mister, I'm just gonna cut off your last name. You're just
Mm-hmm.
like everyone else. But like you said, once I was able to give the rationale and they understood the rationale, it wasn't a fight.
Right.
Because people are like, yeah,
Right.
all right, cool. We'll call Mr.
Mm-hmm.
Tripkosh Mr. We'll call Mr. Reamer, whatever. We'll call Mr. Pierre, Mr. Pierre. And I'm now at a point where it's just like, yeah, it all just boils down to rationale. Wherever you are, if you're able to
Mm-hmm.
articulate that to the kids, then it's 100% okay. Yeah, but I remember those like, no, it's Mr. Pierre, please say da, da, da. It's like there's so many other things that are more important. But however, if that's what's important to you, then yeah, stick to it because
Yeah.
it'll seep out in other ways of like, oh, okay, so you sensitive about this? Say less.
And I
Or if you
think
don't,
that's what it is. Like, what is the thing that you are sensitive about and like, or actually care about? Go after that. You don't have to go
yeah,
after everything. Like, I
yeah,
didn't care about my name. Like, I was fine with that. But those other, like, you're not going to raise your voice in my class. Like, that was something I cared about. And so I went after anytime I felt like someone was attempting to raise their voice.
yeah. Yeah, and if you can explain, because like I tell the kiddos too, I'm like, look, the way I was raised, once it goes to a certain volume past like 6, that to me is an indicator, depending on the context, of disrespect. Now, if
Mm-hmm.
we're talking about Black Panther coming out in a couple months and your voice gets a little, I'm right there with you because the context,
Yes.
again, lends it to it. But if it's like, hey, do you mind picking that thing up? Why do I got to pick it up? It's like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
that's when I'm exactly. And then all the other kids too, like, oh, you done messed up.
Uh-huh. That's the true indicator when the other kids are like, ooh, like,
Yeah.
because they know.
Yep. So
Mm-hmm.
that rationale is super important. I'm excited to see like how you are able to serve the kids. Are there any, and this is tough because you really don't know what you don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But it's great to have a person who can be like a mentor. Do you have a mentor at this new school who you're like, all right, when there are things that are iffy, I know I can go to this person to
Um,
help out?
mentor, I know people who are there.
Okay. Okay.
And so I at least have that connection to where I don't feel completely alone.
All right.
Which is important to me. Like one of the biggest things Serena had told me previously when I mentioned like the thought of like wanting a dean or leadership type role was if she could go back, she wished she did it somewhere else without people she knew.
Hmm.
And I was like back and forth with it because I'm like, on one hand, you know, you get that comfort of like, Willie, you know me. If I mess up, you're gonna roll with it
Yep.
versus the stranger who might not know me and not take it as gracefully. But also that stranger allowing you to like grow and develop because they don't know you. And
Yeah.
so like that is why I like one of the reasons I'm most excited is all of the sped team that I'll be working with, like I don't know any of them.
Yeah.
And so while I'm coming in new, it's like, hey, I have some experience. I don't know all of this role, but I can grow and like they're not coming into this expecting Kiana to be a certain way because they don't even know Kiana.
Right. Right.
And so like that part is really exciting. But then knowing someone who works there, like I just know I have that comfort to where if I'm feeling any type of way, instead of like me being me, I would probably want to go hide somewhere by myself and just like get myself together. Whereas like I can go to that person to at least not feel like alone or like just isolated, like I would probably want to do.
Mhm.
I just have that like, hey, let me go over here and just be with this person or talk to this person and just kind of clear my head.